Hello there, everybody on UK Comic Book Land. I'm here with Belinda Bauer to talk about her latest book, Exit. I believe it was out last January, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, because of the pandemic, there was a delayed publication. And so the hardback came out last January and the paperback came out last summer.
Yeah. If you could start by just giving us a quick summary of the plot, please, Belinda.
Sure. The Exit is it's a crime story, of course, but it's a sort of a light-hearted caper about an old man dying of cancer. So not the most the usual kind of thing, but it's basically about a group of people, volunteers called the Exiteers, who volunteer to sit with people who are terminally ill while they kill themselves, and then remove all evidence of the suicide, so that there's no stigma attached to their dying. And in the case of Exit, something goes terribly wrong.
Yeah, it's a very unusual plot, but I've just read Snap as well. You seem to like to go for the plots that nobody else goes for, which is a unique way of doing things.
Well, I never read a lot of crime fiction, so I don't really know what plots other people go for. I just go for the plots that interest me. You know, sometimes I'll be listening to the radio or somebody will say something in passing and I just suddenly prick up my ears and I'm like, oh my goodness, that because the story for Exit, I was listening to a documentary about a similar group in America called the Guardian Angels, and it was in the middle of the night. I don't sleep very well, so I listen to the radio a lot, and I was listening to these wonderful people talking about how they sit with terminally ill clients and just they're just for moral support. They don't intervene at all in the physicality of it, and they just help them morally to die, and then they remove all the evidence of it. And even though it was this wonderful uplifting story, all I could think of was, wow, that could go so badly wrong. and so that's why I started to write Exit. This is a case where it goes so badly wrong.
Yeah, I've seen Louis Theroux do documentaries on it, and I'm fascinated by the idea of it. It's kind of it's such a complicated thing that would split a lot of people. Do you find that it split your readers as well, or has it been quite?
I think with some of my books, I've known right at the outset that this is going to be a controversial subject. Like with my first book, Blacklands, was written half from the point of view of a 12-year-old boy and half from the point of view of a pedophilic serial killer. And when you have a story like that, when you know that this is the way you want to handle the structure of the book, you know that you're going to split an audience, and you're very much aware that you don't want to, that you want to come down on the right side, and sometimes you don't want to come down on any side, and you have to walk a very careful tightrope when you're dealing with a controversial subject, so that people can make up their own minds.
With Exit, you were covering it from the point of view of the exiteer and then the family as well. When you were doing it from the point of view of the old man Felix that was dealing with it, there was so many comedic things that made me laugh out loud. What was your funniest bit that you enjoyed writing about in the book?
Well, I never set out to make it funny. I always set out to make something realistic. And I just see a lot of funny stuff in real life, But I have to say that my favorite bit in that book had nothing to do with the main plot, really. It was about the statue of Tarka the otter on the quay in Bideford. There is actually a bronze statue of Tarka the otter there. And it's just low enough so that I think I said in the book, it often wore a hat. People vandalize it or they put a hat on it. And every time I think about this otter wearing a hat, it makes me laugh.
Yeah, I love the bit when dark books can make you laugh. I mean, when you got him climbing trees, I just thought that's hilarious.
Yeah, you know, when as soon as I decided on having an elderly protagonist, Felix Pink is 75 years old, and the gentleman that he hoped to help to die is in his 90s. And but as soon as I thought of having Felix as the protagonist, I wanted to see him climb a tree.
In Snap as well, you've got young protagonists like when they were doing the protagonist as a burglar. That's quite interesting too, because looking at your characters from either end of the age scale.
Yeah, I often write about children. You know, my own childhood was very vivid in my mind, always has been. I always thought that I must never forget what it's like to be a child. And that's kind of stood me in good stead as a writer. And also, I always like a moral ambivalence in my characters, you know, so, and a challenge to myself was like Jack Bright in Snap is a 13 or 14-year-old boy who's trying to look after his family in secret. They've been abandoned. His mother's dead, and they've been abandoned by their father. He's trying to keep the family together, and so he turns to burglary. He can't legally work, so he breaks into people's houses. And when we meet him, you know, the first thing he's doing is smashing up a child's bedroom. And I think it's a really interesting thing to set yourself challenges as a writer, to try to think, well, I want people to sympathize with Jack. I want them to empathize with Jack. But at the same time, I want to see if I can do it from the standpoint of the first time they meet Jack, he's smashing up a child's bedroom. It's always an interesting, then you look at the character from a different point of view right from the start.
Yeah. In the books I've read of yours, you've got a lot of secondary themes. I mean, there's hoarding in Snap, and then there's unexpected relationships in Exit.
Yeah, I mean, life is just like that. I mean, people are complicated. People have secret stuff going on. And, you know, I was a journalist for 7 years. And the most interesting thing about being a journalist was just that you realize that everybody is very complicated. And I think that books that don't reflect that are really missing out, because I mean, that's why I love characters. You know, and I'll always put in loads of characters in my book, and I really investigate characters, even minor characters, because to me, they're just as interesting as the major characters. And that's why sometimes in my books, I'll use a character who was a minor character in one book. I'll make them the star of the show in the next book, because they, for instance, in The Facts of Life and Death, the policeman Calvin Bridge just mentions that his brother Louis plucks his leg hairs with a pair of pink tweezers. And that's all that Louis is. That's the only place Louis is mentioned in the book. But when I wrote Snap, I wrote Louis as a main character because I remembered that in my mind, when that came to me, I just thought, wow, that would be an interesting character for another book.
When you started your career back in writing career back in 2010, you've done series as well as standalone. Why have you recently gone to standalones? Because you started off as a series, right?
I never really started off as a series. I didn't want to write a series.
Yeah.
But, you know, obviously publishers kind of want you to write a series because, you know, people get invested in characters and they buy the books regardless of, you know, whether the series is going in the direction you intended to or whether it's all becoming a bit lumpy down the road. And I totally get that. I mean, I used to love series books when I was a kid and stuff like that. But as I started writing, I realized if I try to write a series, then two things are going to happen. Well, the first thing is that every book, I won't be able to do it justice because I'll always have to be thinking of what's going to happen in the next book. So if I wanted to kill somebody in a book, or I wanted to, you know, make a decision about a character which was best for the book, I may not be able to do it because I was committed to a series. And the other thing is that I think I would just bore myself. You know, I didn't want to keep, you know, reintroducing the same characters, and I just didn't want to do it. And so the first 3 books, although they are a loose series, I think they can all be read as standalones as well, with the possible exception of Finders Keepers, where you really should have read at least Dark Side before it. But after Finders Keepers, I just refused to write another book in that series. I just thought, I really need to write something really that interests me in order to keep my readers interested.
When coming up with characters, what's the advice that you give to your students? Because you just started teaching Welsh section crime. We're going to have Claire McIntosh there as well.
Yeah, I actually just did 1 week-long course a few years ago before the pandemic, and it was so much fun. And so I'm going to go back there and do it again in September. And Claire was our guest reader, which was wonderful. I hope she does it again this year. Last time I did it with Jasper Ford, who was really good fun to teach with. And this year I'm going to be doing it with Sharon Bolton, who I assume will be good fun to teach with. And but my advice to students on characters is really be real. Don't take your characters from books. Take your characters from life.
When you say take your characters from life, would you kind of pick them up from like train journeys and things? It's like, and where do you go to observe people so you can pick up your characters from life?
Just literally everyday life. I mean, I don't really get about much because I'm a bit of I stay at home, and but even I cannot help meeting interesting people all the time. It's just it's an attitude of mind. I think you have to be open to people, and you have to be open to people's idiosyncrasies and their speech patterns, and the things they like, the things they don't like, the way they eat an apple. There's so many tiny things that you can pick up on somebody that will just elevate them as a character in your mind. Like the thing about Louis Bridge plucking his leg hairs. It's something it just popped into my head when I wrote that piece. I didn't think about it except to store it away in the back of my mind and think, there's a mental disorder called trichotillomania, where people can't bear hair on their bodies, and this is what Louis has. And so even though he's this kind of rough and tumble kind of criminal underbelly kind of guy, he plucks every single hair on his body with a pair of Tweezerman tweezers. Things like that. You can just take them and just push them a little bit, and they'll become these wonderful idiosyncratic moments in your book, rather than just say he ate an apple. You can say he ate an apple, and eventually so completely that all he was eventually holding was a core and 4 pips. Do you know what I mean? So you can just take something random and actually really think about how could they do this? Does it help me to explain the character in a new and different way? My editor's always telling me that I don't describe my characters well enough, and I really shy away from describing them physically too much.
Yeah.
I like people to understand my characters and what they look like and what they are by the way they behave and the things they do.
Yeah, like Felix, when you're describing his clothes and what he wears and the old jacket his wife bought.
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, you would not believe how many people have contacted me and said, my grandfather had that same jacket, and I know that's why Felix has that jacket.
When coming up with the people he works with, because Exeter it must be difficult to try and come up with different motivations for doing something so controversial. but you seem to do it well and balance it. Okay. How did you decide what attributes to go for?
I think motivation is always such an interesting thing. There are sort of like basic truths about motivation. You know, there's money, there's sex, and not much else. Almost everything comes down to money and sex. So what you want to try and do is try and almost obscure the motivation, you know, so that what somebody's motivation appears to be one thing, but actually at the root of it is money or sex.
Yeah.
or you know, for instance, you know, and that's why a crime novel is so interesting, especially one which where you've played with the structure and you can see what somebody does and then find out why they've done it. I think that's more interesting almost than you know, see somebody do something which means that they have to do something, which, you know, so it's rather than be a linear journey through motivation, it's more interesting to see it in reverse. And it reminds me of when I was a screenwriter, you know, one of the small things you learn as a screenwriter, and once you know it, when you watch a movie, you'll always see it, is that when somebody walks into a room and sees something shocking, right, you never see the shocking thing first and then them reacting. They walk into a room, they react, and then the camera goes and shows you the shocking thing. That's the way it works. And so a lot of my book writing is drawn from my experience as a screenwriter and as a movie fan. I always feel like I write books as though they're movie scripts. And so little things like that about the order in which things happen, I think it's more exciting to see somebody do something and then find out why they've done it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Who would you say you learned that from in film?
I mean, I think that's just a general thing. I mean, it would be very unusual to see any director do it the other way around, because it's more effective this way around. So it works so well that there's no reason to do it the other way unless you're trying to make a point about something else, you know. So unless the point is not the reaction but the thing itself, which it almost never is.
Yeah. When looking at the small town policeman like in Exit, do you think it makes there seems to be a difference in character between small town and big town detection?
I suppose if I were writing about, most of my life I've lived in small towns, you know, or in an insular part of a small town. And I think that my answer would be that if I were writing about a place like New York or London or something like that, then I would still try to create that sense of community, you know. Unless the point was, the only reason I can imagine setting a book somewhere like New York or LA or something is if I wanted the disconnection between people to be an integral part of the book. You know, when it comes to community, then small towns are easier. Small towns are more realistic.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about this, because the CID guy that didn't really want to be in CID, but then you bring him back. I mean, there's a challenge between who you empathise with, and it's definitely him for me.
Is that Marvel? Or Calvin Bridge?
Yeah.
Oh, the young lad. Yeah, he's really sweet, isn't he? I mean, he is. And again, it's one of those things that you just think, you know, you read so much about, you know, coppers who want to get on, who want to, you know, be the star of the show and, you know, want to boss the department. And, you know, and Calvin is actually just not really suited to being a policeman, to be honest. And, you know, he'd be better off as a I don't know, graphic designer or something. And so I like that character. It's nice to have a policeman who's actually good at the job, and he's very empathetic. And so that's what makes him good at the job. But he doesn't really much like it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's always interesting to me when people are doing stuff they don't want to do.
Yeah, because he seems to know everybody in the town, but doesn't want to kind of. He seems to enjoy the chatting, but doesn't like investigating, which I think is quite cool.
Yeah, I just don't think he's got the stomach for being a policeman, really. So I don't know where he'll go next. It's quite interesting that he did come back after going back into uniform. But, you know, it's almost as though he's there back in plain clothes against his wishes sort of thing. And you know, the trouble is he's good at the job. I mean, what's he supposed to do?
Yeah, because in Snap you kind of got the opposite problem, because you've got a murder detective who comes somewhere where there's hardly any murders, and when they say, well, you've got to deal with burglaries when there's a law, and the reaction to the fact that there might be a law was, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Marvel is really probably my favorite character in any of my books, because I created him because he's a cliche. People sometimes complain, oh, he's such a cliche, he's a drunk and he's really a maverick. And I'm like, yes, I know he is. He's all those ridiculous things. But the reason I created him is because I really make him suffer for it. And I really enjoy doing that.
Yeah.
You know, most of these sort of like drunken maverick cops, they're kind of a bit sexy. Marvel's not. He's an idiot, you know, and people think he's an idiot. And he gets into all kinds of horrible situations because he's an idiot, you know. But again, he's good at his job, but he goes about it in such a sort of non-empathetic way. He's the polar opposite of Calvin Bridge. But I enjoy both of them.
If you were to put them in a plot together, where would you go?
Oh my goodness, that would be worlds colliding, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Well, Marvel's already got somebody in his life, Reynolds, who is kind of his counterbalance. And of course, Reynolds can't bear that Marvel is allowed to do all these things and gets away with them, and, you know, and pushes the envelope and does stuff that's illegal. I mean, Reynolds can't bear it. He's making a list. He's getting all the evidence he needs to put Marvel away and that kind of stuff. So, you know, that's kind of fun. I think Calvin might be completely overwhelmed by Marvel. I think he'd be very bullied by him.
Yeah. When Calvin's boss comes into it and tries to convince him to go back, and initially in Exit, they don't know what the crime is, do they?
No, they don't. Yeah.
And when starting something off, and you've got like two people with really different ways of looking at things. Did you how many times did you kind of change it, or was that always the way you planned that?
Well, you know, there's plans and then there's plans. You know? I mean, you know, in my head, whenever I think of a story, I think of the last page. I think of what I want to happen emotionally, you know. And then you have to try and think to yourself, well, how am I going to get from here to there, to the last page, in the most original and unexpected way possible? Because the emotional arc of the book, you know, where the reader wants to go emotionally, is not always the end of the story. It could be past the end of the story or before the end of the story. And it's also not always it may be the most obvious thing that you want to happen, but then you can't make the plot obvious. You know, you can't let people know that they're going to get that emotional sensation at the end, the emotional completion that they wanted. You have to then, once you've established it, you know that you want it, you know that they want it, But how you get there, you've got to hide it. You've got to pretend it's not going to happen. You've got to make people really believe that they're not going to get what they want, so that when they get what they want, they're really happy and surprised.
Yeah. When in Exit you split the narrative between like two different ways. Did you write them at the same time, or did it come in the linear form?
I wrote them. I mean, what you always do, I always find the structure of a book the hardest thing about it, because you're trying so hard to hide stuff. That's the terrible thing about a crime novel. If this was literary fiction, I would just start at the beginning and end at the end, and that would be simple. But because it's a crime novel, you've got to hide a whole bunch of stuff. And so the structure becomes part of the way that you do that, by, doing different time frames, different points of view. And the skill really is to make it still feel as though it's flowing. You don't want to feel that the reader is thinking, oh no, now they're not going to tell me about so-and-so because that's obviously who done it. You have to be really careful with your structure so the reader is still feeling that they're going forward and they're still uncovering stuff, and they feel that it's all happening at a pace that it should and in the way that it should, and yet you sneakily turn the tables on them and you're not showing them things and you're not telling them stuff.
When you were working on the book for Snap, it's quite interesting that you mentioned literary fiction, because of course it got nominated for the Booker. Which how did that make you feel? Because there's a list in Crime called not the Booker Prize, so it's kind of like
yeah. I mean, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I was so proud and so pleased for crime fiction, because I think it's an incredibly underrated skill to write a crime book. Because, as I said, with literary fiction, you start at the beginning, you end at the end, or wherever you want to. Nobody's really kind of trying to work anything out. You're not trying to hide anything. You're just trying to write the best book you can. And I say that, just trying to write the best book you can. But I think that crime fiction has to do so much more than that, and try to be a really, really great book too. And so to be longlisted for the Booker Prize was just really, really emotional for me. It was wonderful.
I would say that when looking at your plots, what would you say is the one you've been the most proud of?
Well, I always used to answer that question by saying Rubbernecker, because it was a book that I thought of the plot, and I thought two things. I thought, I've got to do so much research about dead bodies and I don't know anything about them. And the other thing I thought was, it's going to be impossible to write. It's actually going to be impossible because of the way that Rubbernecker unfolds and the things that happen in it are so complex. I hope they don't feel like that when somebody's reading them. But to actually write that book was one of the hardest things I ever did. And it came out the way I wanted it to. And most books don't. Most books that I've published aren't what I wanted them to be. You don't know that. You don't know how good Exit could have been or Snap could have been. I always know that they could have been better if I'd just been a bit smarter. But Rubbernecker came out. I look at it now and I'm like, I'm amazed I was able to write that.
Of course, that won you the Theakston's Prize, and that Theakston's is where I first heard about you, when you were on stage with I think it was Eva Dolan, I think, and
oh yes, yeah.
What did winning the Theakston Prize do for you after you won that?
Oh, it's wonderful. It's just such a validation. I mean, I won the thing about the Theakston's Prize was Rubbernecker was my first book that was beyond the first three, the trilogy, as you say, the series that I was starting to write and which I never really wanted to write. So I'd been lucky enough to win the Gold Dagger for Blacklands, which was my first book. Then I wrote the two sequential books, Dark Side and Finders Keepers. And then I wanted to stop. And I knew that I could be putting the brakes on my entire career because people were starting to get into the series and that kind of stuff. And I was just like, I just don't want to do it. And I had this idea for Rubbernecker, and I just wanted to write that. And so when it won the Theakston's Prize, I felt completely vindicated. And at that point in my career, I just relaxed and I thought, I can write anything I want to. It doesn't have to be related to anything that anybody has ever thought of as a crime novel before. And it gave me an enormous amount of freedom.
If you were to come up with a panel that you'd love to be on, what would it be and why?
It would be probably about the Grand National. I can't imagine a crime thing that hasn't been done yet. So I'll just go straight off the books. I'll have a panel on the Grand National. Thank you very much.
Are you a big horse racing fan then?
I am a big horse racing fan.
Yeah. I must admit, to have the first female jockey win the Grand National, it must be a kind of a bit of a strange thing to see her fall off at the fence this time, trying to win it again. It must be horrible.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was such a shame though that she didn't have a crowd there when she won her Grand National.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, the Nationals like that. You're up 1 minute, you're down the next. But yeah, it was a shame. I would have liked to have seen her win it with a crowd there, but she'll have other chances. She's a great jockey.
If you were to name a horse, would you use a book title then?
Oh, you know, that's such an interesting. There's so many horse names that would be. I used to think I would call a horse Stanley Kubrick because I was a great admirer of his film. But I haven't thought about one lately.
I just love the idea of really strange names, and you just think that could be a book title. I mean, like
I think horse names and book names. I think titles are so important. I mean, I always really work hard on my titles, and you know, I always judge a book by its cover as well. And so I really like the direction that my books are going in now, where they're very stark, very graphic and simple. And I'm working hard to keep those very small words as my titles from now on.
Yeah, the cover for Exit didn't really change much. It was originally green cover and then went to yellow. Why did you change it from green to yellow?
It wasn't my decision. I think it was a really good one though. I think the cover for Exit, both the green and the yellow, were really designed to show up in bookshops, which is such a shame because the pandemic meant that nobody could actually go into a bookshop and look for them, which is a great pity, but I still think they stand up as covers. I think they're really good.
Snap was a dark red one, and that's very reminiscent of kind of a blood colour. I mean, I know that authors often don't have a lot to say about the covers, but I just think that that's a great colour.
Yeah. I mean, what's really lovely about Snap is so many crime novels have blood on the cover traditionally, and which is not something that I ever really wanted on my covers. But what the designer of Snap did just went the whole cover was blood, and then that lovely motif of the snapped rope in the middle of it. I thought was just a piece of genius. And so, I thought it was thrilling. It was a really thrilling cover for me. I thought it was great.
When starting Exit and Snap, I think that the start is always the hardest thing to do. I mean, I've tried to start several plots. What advice would you give to someone that was trying to start a novel?
Well, for a start, that's always a really good start, is to actually get going, sit down, start writing. You know what? You may change where you start the book, but the important thing is that you know where you're going to finish the book. And
Yeah.
I think that because that's where you want your reader to end up emotionally. It's not about solving the crime. The end of the book is not about solving the crime. The end of the book should be about the emotions being completed. You get what you want at the end of the book. And so once you've established what you want the end of the book to be, then really you should kind of work your way back and find a point that would be a good beginning, so that the entire structure of the book feels circular.
Yeah. I mean, when you start the exit, because I would say that it's probably not one that you'd solve, because you're following both the perpetrator and the victim. So it's not really a solved book. It's more of a journey. Would you say that's your style, a journey?
Yeah, I
Journey
think
style?
so. I mean, I always like to describe Exit as a coming of old age book, because it's about Felix, really. It's about Felix's journey, after the death of his son, after the death of his wife. All he's waiting for really is the death of his dog so that he can kill himself. That's basically where we start with Felix. But where Felix ends up is somewhere completely different from where he thinks he's going to at the start. And that's really what the journey is. So although I said that Exit is a book about an old man dying of cancer who wants to kill himself, that's really the subplot of Exit. The crime is the subplot. In almost all my books, the crime is the subplot.
Why would you say that you go for the crime as a subplot option? Because I really enjoy that, because it's, you feel like you're going along the journey, and you're not having to think, well, what have I missed here? I mean, you do get that, but it's not like, what have you missed here? You don't. It's like you're following the characters and their emotions, really.
That's right. I mean, the whole thing is an emotional journey, and that's really what, when a crime happens in real life, it happens to real people, and it's perpetrated by real people. And so the crime itself is just this one tiny point in time and space where two people met and one person did something terrible to the other person. It's so minor. It's how can you want that to be the whole plot? The plot is the people. The plot is how they got there. The plot is what they did afterwards. The people are the only interesting thing about any book.
Who would you use as a real character if you were to base it on anybody in real life? Because
Did you mean a famous person or
a famous person, because I was just transcribing an interview with Leonora Natras, and she bases her books on a lot of real people, and I'm just curious as to if you were able to choose a real person that you'd write a book about, who would it be and why?
I haven't got any plans to write a book about anybody in particular, but Skipper in Exit was based on a neighbor of mine who I used to walk my dog with for 10 years. I walked every morning with this lovely old man called Ray, and he was an old sea captain, and he was just so entertaining and such a lovely guy. And when I came up with the idea for Exit, and I thought that Skipper could be my main character, and I based it entirely on him. One of the very few times that I've ever based a character on a real person.
Skipper is such a unique person. As you say, based on your neighbour. What is it about Skipper that you enjoy writing about? Because that's such a nice arc. I want to see where it goes, obviously.
I think what's interesting for me about Exit is that it was the first book where I wrote elderly people as the main characters. in each book, I really enjoy. What interests me about each book is that I have a challenge. That's what keeps me interested in the book. And in Exit, it was being able to write older characters convincingly. And so, and of course, older characters are just the same as younger characters. They are still the same people, and they still have great vitality and great humor and great passion. And I liked Skipper being diametrically opposed to Felix. Felix is younger, but he's already behaving as though his life is over. Yeah. Whereas Skipper is old, he's at death's door, and yet he has so much more vitality about him than Felix does when we meet them both. That's what I enjoyed about him.
I just love the idea of I would love to be able to skip a boat and things. Have you ever done that yourself?
No, I'm really scared of the sea. No, I'm not crazy about being on boats.
Say you're really scared of the sea. What's the thing you've written about, or you might want to write about, that scared you, that you think, oh, that might make a good plot?
Well, I think everything scares me. I mean, my light's just fading here, so I'm just going to try and bring it up a little bit.
That's okay.
I think in every book I've written about something that scares me. Rubbernecker was written after I'd had a spell in hospital, and it made me realize how vulnerable you feel when you're in hospital, because not only are you feeling unwell enough to be in hospital, but you're also like sleeping in a room full of strangers where other strangers can just walk in and out, and you're in your pajamas the whole time, which always makes you feel a bit vulnerable, doesn't it? Yeah. So things like that. Every single book, I mean, that's what I suppose makes them frightening and emotive, is that I am actually genuinely scared of almost every situation that I've written about in my life.
Yeah, I just think the idea of writing from the point of view of somebody in a hospital would be probably the scariest thing for me, because that's where I started my reading, because I started reading things like Jeffrey Deaver and The Bone Collector and Stuart McBride while I was in hospital.
Yeah.
What did you read to help you through a hospital period?
Gee, you know what? I can't remember, because I don't think I felt well enough to read. I think it was just one of those situations where I was just relieved to be in bed and sleeping and drugged up. Yeah. I've never spent extended time in hospital. I've, just been a matter of a few days. But it's just one of those situations, I think, that everybody feels vulnerable in. And so it was an interesting thing to explore in a novel,
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because I was in the hospital for over a month during, about 12 years ago, where they had me back done. And you're right, you are in a room with people you've never been before, and they end up talking about everything and anything, don't they?
Yes, they do, whether you want them to or not. Yeah,
I mean, I'm just thinking about the possibilities for a plot there.
I think I've just done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about Mark Billingham's Rabbit Hole. Have you read that?
No.
It's because it's he's in a mental institution, and it's just a really interesting book. Who would you recommend to people that you've read recently?
I don't read very much at all. I hardly ever read. In fact, I mostly read nonfiction, because if I read fiction, I just pick it apart myself. However, I did have the pleasure of reading Claire McIntosh's latest book, because I'm doing a panel with her on online at the end of the month Her book's called The Last Party. That was really enjoyable, set in North Wales. And she introduces a new pair of detectives, Leo and Fionn, who are very, very interesting. And she really introduces them with a bang. And I know that that's going to be a whole new series for her. So that's really fun.
Yeah. Do you like partnerships in books then?
Yeah, I think so. I think because it's an extension of the whole relationship thing, you know. I think odd couple partnerships are particularly interesting, but you know, a good writer can make anything work. You know, something that you didn't think would work, a good writer will make that work. And so it's really about, it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it.
What's coming up for you next after Exit? Because you must have. It's a long time since you must have finished Exit now.
It is a very long time, but I started writing my next book before the first lockdown, and I've only just got back to it now.
Fair enough. I mean, lockdown for a lot of people has kind of slowed them down. I know it has me, but when getting back to writing, what about the routine gets you going after such a time away?
I have to clean my desk. My desk is a real mess, and I have to clean it up and you know, sit there. I have to sit there and actually do it. It's very easy to think, oh, it doesn't mean I spend the whole time writing at my desk. Quite often I'll write on my sofa or in the greenhouse if it's a nice day. I'll go and sit out there. But I actually have to clean my desk before I can do anything.
Ellie Griffiths has got a cat Gus with her all the time. Is what do you have with you when you're writing that might well be a distraction or a help?
Well, my dog is always with me. I don't know if you can hear her whining in the background because she wants me to play with her, but she's always with me. And so she is both a distraction and a help, because when she's asleep at my feet, then I feel much calmer and I feel I can concentrate on the book. And then when I get stuck on the book, I wake her up and make her be a distraction for me.
Have you ever come up with ideas where you're taking her out for a walk then?
Yeah, I mean, walking the dog is such a great place for ideas. You know, you're by yourself, you're not really concentrating on anything very much. You're just letting things, you know, like move through your mind a little bit, you know, and it's lovely. It's lovely. It's a great way to come up with ideas for books. But most of my ideas I come up with in the middle of the night when I'm just lying in bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, those things. That's when your mind really starts to create and because there's no other distraction.
I'm just trying to think of what I would do to start to advise people about the best way to come up with a really unusual question, because I do interviews all the time. But what is the most hardest question you've ever been asked?
I think probably what kind of panel would you like to be on? That's right out of the blue. That's the kind of thing. Or what would you name a racehorse? Those are the things. Those are important questions. You can't just snap an answer back.
Yeah, I mean, I do like to come up with unusual questions, and
If you should have given them to me in writing, and I would have had good answers for you.
I would love to be able to do that, but I don't kind of come up with the questions until the time, because with being dyslexic, I don't write them down.
Oh no, okay, you've blown it then. I could have given you great answers for both of those.
What's the
I've just thought of an answer. Okay, about naming the racehorse, because I wrote a book called High Rollers.
Yeah.
And the sequel to that, if they'd ever wanted one, which they didn't, was going to be set in the world of horse racing. And I had the name for the horse, and it was going to be the name of the book as well. It was called Top Kicker.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, because Top Kicker is also a poker term.
Yeah.
And the hero in that was a poker player. So that was going to be the name of the book and the horse.
I do love poker myself. Do you play?
Yeah, I do. Oh, where do you play online?
I've won a local tournament at a pub, and I like to take money off my mates at the pub. So
yeah, I love taking money off my mates. It's one of my favorite things.
Have you ever played at like a festival after you've been on the panel or anything like that?
Do you know what? Mark Billingham and I set up a poker game at the Harrogate Festival, at the Harrogate Crime Festival, and then I couldn't play, so he played, and he took money off everybody, and I was furious because I bet they were all saps, and I could easily have taken money off them too. So it was really annoying because we got it all sorted out, and then he got to reap the rewards.
Yeah. Do you think that crime writing and reading people makes you a better poker player then?
It's I don't know about crime writing, but I think being a writer makes you a better poker player. I think that you do observe people better than most people do. Yeah.
I just think that the finding someone's tell is always fun. I mean, have you got one that you're trying to avoid telling people about? Everyone's got one.
I talk too much when I'm nervous, but then again, being nervous at poker could be because you've got a great hand or a bad hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's nice to spot. I play regularly with a group of friends, and I know most of their tells.
Oh, have you ever used one of their tells as a character trait in a book?
Only in High Rollers, which was I wrote at the same time as Black Clans. The main character has a tell that he knows about and that he tries to suppress.
I'm really intrigued as to what you've got next, because I love your style, and I can never tell what you're going to write next. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, or is it too early in the?
It's quite early in the process. It's a story which is based on truth, which is a first for me, and it's based in two timelines, which is about 1919, and then up to the 30s, and then the present day. Scout, be quiet. Shh. Sorry about that. And it's about I don't know if I can say what it's about really, because I don't know.
Two timelines is fair enough.
Sorry?
Two timelines is fair enough. I mean,
yeah, but it's the first time I'll have written a period piece, because obviously 1920s, 30s, to me that's a period piece, and so it's been interesting to write that. I really enjoyed it actually. I really got into it much quicker than I thought I would, because I've been reading a lot of Anthony Trollope, and although that's not his period, it's interesting to read a period piece and then to actually write something in period as well.
Have you learned anything from writing historical that you haven't done before?
Oh my God, so much. I mean, again, this was a story that I came up with. Well, I heard about and then decided to fictionalize, and it was about a subject I had no idea about whatsoever. So the last 4 or 5 years of my life have been researching this subject and learning so much about it, and just been wonderful. I mean, that's the joy of writing, really, is that when you come up with an idea which is set in a place or a field which you know nothing about, you just have to research it. You just have to become very, very familiar with it, and that enriches your writing so much.
Well, thanks so much for such a really interesting hour and the tellings about Exit, and I'm really looking forward to reading more of your earlier work. Yeah,
Yeah, I really hope you enjoy it.
I'm sure I will.
Yeah, I should don't read Rubbernecker with the lights off though. That'll really put the wind up
Yeah.
you.
Well, thanks. I hope to see you soon at Harrogate. Are you going to be there this year?
Oh, I would so love to be. I really hope I will be. Yeah, it'd be really nice to see you there.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'll see everybody else in a fortnight on the 25th, because I'm having a break to write my own stuff. So,
Okay, good luck.
yeah.
Have I been giving you free tips, Alex?
Well, that's what I've been doing for 2 years while I've
Oh
been
my
doing.
God.
That's what I've been doing for 2 years while I've been doing this. Yeah.
Oh my God, I feel another crime novel coming on. The man who stole all his ideas from his speakers.
Well, I think I'd be in trouble because I think I've done about 200 interviews now, so trying to work out who I nicked the idea from.
It's an absolute crime heist.
Yeah.
I must just say hello to Daniel on your feed there, because he's asked a few questions, and I just wanted to say hi to him. And yeah, Daniel, I'll work on a new book as soon as I possibly can. Okay, it is going to be a bit of a while though.
What has Daniel asked? Because obviously I can't read the.
Oh, he keeps asking when's the next book coming out, but it will be a while because I haven't finished writing it yet.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Belinda, and I hope to see everybody at Harrogate soon.
Yeah, that'll be great. Nice to see you, Alex. Cheerio.